December 20th, 1943. Over Nazi Germany. A German fighter ace has an American bomber in his sights. The bomber is crippled, dying. Half the crew is wounded. No ammunition left to defend themselves. One pull of the trigger, and the German pilot gets his 28th kill. That earns him the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military honor. He's been chasing this moment for months. It's right there. Easy shot. Instead, he does something that defies every order he's ever been given. He pulls alongside the bomber, makes eye contact with the terrified American pilot, and salutes. Then he escorts the enemy aircraft, protecting it from German anti-aircraft guns until it reaches safety. Why? Why would a German fighter ace save his enemy? And here's the truly incredible part. The two pilots wouldn't meet again for 46 years. When they finally found each other, they became best friends until death. This is the true story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown. A story about honor, about humanity in the middle of hell, and about a moment of mercy that changed two lives forever. Every word of this is documented. Every detail is true. This is one of the most beautiful stories to come out of World War II. Let me tell you how it happened. December 20th, 1943. Bremen, Germany. The 379th Bombardment Group was assigned to bomb a Focke-Wulf aircraft factory. It was a critical target. The factory was producing German fighters that were tearing Allied bombers apart. 21-year-old Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown was piloting a B-17 Flying Fortress, nicknamed Ye Old Pub. It was his first mission as a pilot in command. First mission. Charlie was a farm kid from West Virginia, joined up after Pearl Harbor, trained for a year, and now, on his very first mission as aircraft commander, he was heading into one of the most heavily defended areas in Germany. The B-17 Flying Fortress was an incredible machine. 4 engines, 13 .50 caliber machine guns, could carry 8,000 pounds of bombs, crew of 10 men. They called it the Flying Fortress because it was supposed to be able to defend itself. The theory was that formations of B-17s, with all those machine guns, could fight their way through anything. The reality was much bloodier. The mission went wrong from the start. Heavy cloud cover scattered the bomber formation. Ye Old Pub got separated from the main group. Now they were alone, and German fighters hunted stragglers like wolves hunting wounded deer. The first attack came near Bremen. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s. They came in waves, head-on attacks, diving from above, attacking from the rear. The intercom was chaos. Gunners shouting targets. Fighter 12 o'clock high. 2 coming in low. The sound of 50 cals firing. The smell of gunpowder and hydraulic fluid. Then the hits started coming. A 20mm cannon shell exploded in the nose, killed the navigator instantly, wounded the bombardier. Another shell hit the tail. The tail gunner, Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode, was killed. Engine number 2 took a direct hit. On fire. Charlie feathered the propeller, tried to shut it down. The plane shuddered. Engine number 4 was hit, losing oil pressure, sputtering. They were flying on 2 engines now, barely maintaining altitude. The oxygen system was damaged. At 27,000 feet, without oxygen, the crew would pass out in minutes. Charlie pushed the yoke forward. Dove for lower altitude. Get below 10,000 feet where they could breathe. As they descended, more fighters attacked. The ball turret gunner was wounded. The waist gunners were wounded. Blood everywhere. Shell casings rolling on the floor. The bomber's skin was shredded. Holes the size of basketballs. You could see daylight through the fuselage. And then, the ammunition ran out. Every gun, empty. They were defenseless. Charlie leveled off at about 1,000 feet, just above the treetops, flying north toward the coast, toward England, toward home. If they could just make it to the North Sea, if they could just get out of German airspace, but they were flying slow, damaged, leaving a trail of smoke, easy prey. And then, a German fighter appeared off their right wing. The German pilot was Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, 27 years old, veteran fighter ace with 27 confirmed kills. Franz wasn't a Nazi. That's important to understand. He joined the Luftwaffe in the 1930s because he loved flying. His older brother had been a fighter pilot in World War I. Franz worshipped him, wanted to follow in his footsteps. He was trained as a commercial airline pilot first, Lufthansa. Then, when war broke out, he was called up for military service. Franz had fought in North Africa, Sicily. Now he was defending Germany itself, based at Oldenburg Airfield, about 40 miles north of Bremen. He'd been on patrol that morning, heard on the radio that American bombers were in the area, took off to intercept. He'd already shot down 2 bombers that day. Well, assisted in shooting them down. Shared kills. That brought his total to 27. One more confirmed kill would give him 28, and 28 kills meant he'd qualify for the Knight's Cross, the Ritterkreuz. It was the highest honor Germany could give a fighter pilot. Franz had been chasing this for months, risking his life every day, watching friends die, all for that medal, that recognition. And then he saw it. A lone B-17, flying low, smoking, obviously damaged. Franz pushed his throttle forward. His Messerschmitt Bf-109 was fast, agile, armed with 2 13mm machine guns and 1 20mm cannon. More than enough to destroy a crippled bomber. He approached from behind, got into position. The B-17's tail gun wasn't moving. No defensive fire at all. This was going to be easy. Franz armed his weapons, lined up his sights. The B-17 filled his gun sight. His finger moved to the trigger. And then, he got close enough to see inside the bomber. Franz pulled alongside the B-17, close enough to see through the shattered plexiglass, close enough to see faces. What he saw horrified him. The tail gunner was slumped over, dead. The waist gunner was barely conscious, blood streaming down his face. The ball turret was mangled, destroyed. Through the cockpit windows, he could see the pilots. Charlie Brown, covered in blood from shrapnel wounds he didn't even know he had. The co-pilot desperately trying to help control the aircraft. Franz later described this moment. I saw this airplane and I could see right through it. I could see the gunners were either dead or wounded. I could see the fear in the pilot's eyes. This was not a threat. This was a funeral procession. Franz thought about his own brother, his older brother August, who'd been a World War I fighter pilot. August had been Franz's hero, taught him about honor, about chivalry, about how a warrior should conduct himself. August had told him, quote voice, "If you shoot a man in a parachute, you're a murderer. If you shoot a man in a lifeboat, you're a murderer. Honor demands you fight only those who can fight back." Franz looked at that B-17, at those wounded, defenseless men, and he made a choice. He didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he flew alongside them. Inside the B-17, Charlie Brown's blood ran cold. A German fighter, right off their wing. So close he could see the pilot's face. So close he could see the markings on the Messerschmitt. This was it. They were dead. Charlie looked over, made eye contact with the German pilot, and Franz saluted. Then he gestured, pointing north, toward the coast, toward England. He was telling them, "Fly that way, I won't shoot you." Charlie couldn't believe it. His crew couldn't believe it. Was this a trick? Some kind of game? But Franz stayed there, flying formation, off their wing, protecting them. Franz didn't just refuse to shoot them. He actively protected them. The route to the North Sea went over German-occupied territory, and that territory was bristling with anti-aircraft guns, flak batteries, 88mm cannons that could tear a bomber apart. A damaged B-17, flying low and slow, would be an easy target. The flak gunners would see it coming for miles. But Franz stayed in formation with them, right on their wing. So close that any German gunner looking up would see a German fighter escorting the bomber. And German gunners don't shoot when their own fighters are nearby. Too much risk of friendly fire. So Franz's presence, his Bf-109 flying alongside them, protected the B-17 from ground fire. He was literally using himself as a shield. If anyone fired at the bomber, they might hit him. For several minutes, they flew like this. The crippled American bomber, the German fighter ace, side by side, over enemy territory. Franz even flew slightly ahead at one point, trying to signal the German flak batteries, "Don't shoot. I've got this." Inside the B-17, Charlie Brown and his crew were in shock, complete disbelief. They should be dead. This German pilot should have killed them 10 times over. The tail gunner was dead. The bombardier was dying. Half the crew was wounded. The plane was barely flying. And yet this German pilot, this enemy, was saving their lives. Why? Charlie would ask himself that question for the next 46 years. Finally, they reached the coast. The North Sea stretched out before them. Once they crossed into international waters, they'd be relatively safe. British air-sea rescue would find them if they had to ditch. Franz flew with them right to the coastline. Then he pulled alongside one more time, made eye contact with Charlie again. He gave a slow, formal salute, a gesture of respect, warrior to warrior. Then he tapped his head, pointed to Charlie, pointed down. The message was clear. You're thinking about landing in Sweden. Don't. You'll be interned for the rest of the war. Head for England. And then Franz peeled away, waggled his wings, and turned back toward Germany. Charlie Brown watched him go, watched that Messerschmitt disappear into the distance. He'd just been saved by the enemy. Okay, pause for a second. If this story is hitting you the way it hit me when I first heard it, do me a favor and hit that like button. And drop a comment. Would you have done what Franz did? Thrown away your chance at the highest honor to save an enemy? I genuinely want to know what you think, because this story gets even more incredible. Charlie and Franz won't meet for 46 years, but when they do, it's one of the most beautiful friendships you'll ever hear about. All right, let's keep going, because we need to talk about what happened next. Ye Old Pub limped across the North Sea. They were losing altitude. Engine number 4 finally quit completely. Now they were flying on just 2 engines. The hydraulics were failing. The landing gear might not come down. Charlie nursed that bomber across the water, every minute expecting it to just fall apart. The entire aircraft was vibrating, groaning, barely holding together. They couldn't make it back to their base at Kimbolton. Too far. Charlie aimed for the first airfield he could find, RAF Seething, an emergency landing field on the English coast. The tower cleared them for immediate landing. Fire trucks and ambulances were already rolling. Charlie lowered the landing gear. One main gear came down. The other was stuck. He recycled it, tried again. Finally, it locked into place. They came in hot, too fast. But if he slowed down more, they'd stall. The wheels touched. The plane bounced. Touched again. Charlie stood on the brakes. They rolled to a stop. Engines coughing, smoking. The entire aircraft groaning like a dying animal. And then, silence. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd made it home. Ground crews ran up to the bomber and stopped dead in their tracks, staring. One mechanic counted over 400 bullet and shrapnel holes. The tail was barely attached. The nose was shattered. One engine was completely destroyed. Another was barely functional. The crew chief looked at it and said, "This airplane shouldn't have made it back. This is a miracle." He had no idea how right he was. Charlie Brown never reported the German pilot who spared him. Why? Because he'd been ordered not to. When Charlie told his debriefing officer about the German fighter pilot who escorted them to safety, the officer cut him off. "Forget about it. Don't mention it again. Don't tell anyone." The officer was worried about propaganda, worried that a story about a good German might undermine the war effort, worried it would sound like weakness or sympathy for the enemy. So Charlie kept quiet. He told his crew not to talk about it. And for years, decades, he said nothing. But he never forgot. He couldn't forget. That moment haunted him. Who was that German pilot? Why did he do it? Was he still alive? Meanwhile, in Germany, Franz Stigler also stayed silent. When he landed back at Oldenburg, his wingman asked, "Did you get him? Did you get your 28th kill?" Franz lied, said he'd lost sight of the bomber in clouds, said it got away. He never told anyone what he'd actually done, because if his commanders found out he'd spared an enemy bomber, jokingly stayed silent, he'd have been court-martialed, possibly executed. Letting an enemy escape wasn't mercy. In Nazi Germany, it was treason. So Franz kept his secret, and Charlie kept his secret. For 46 years, neither man spoke of that day. The war ended. Franz survived. Barely. He flew over 400 combat missions, was shot down multiple times, survived the entire war. He moved to Canada in the 1950s, started a new life, became a successful businessman. Charlie went home to West Virginia, worked for the State Department, got married, had a family. Both men lived full lives, but both carried that memory, that moment over Germany when an enemy became a guardian angel, and both wondered, is he still alive? Charlie Brown was retired, living in Miami. He just read a book about aerial combat in World War II, and something clicked. He realized the order not to talk about the German pilot, that was 40 years ago. The war was over. The Cold War was ending. There was no reason to keep silent anymore. He wanted to find that German pilot, to thank him, to understand why he'd done it. But how do you find one German pilot? Charlie didn't even know his name, didn't know his unit. Just knew he flew a Bf 109 out of somewhere near Bremen in December 1943. That's not a lot to go on. Charlie started small. He wrote to Luftwaffe veteran associations, placed ads in military history magazines, contacted historians. His ad basically said, looking for a German fighter pilot who flew a Messerschmitt Bf 109 near Bremen on December 20th, 1943. He escorted a damaged B-17 to safety instead of shooting it down. I was the pilot of that B-17. I want to thank him. For 4 years, nothing. No responses. Charlie started to think the pilot must be dead, or maybe didn't want to be found. And then, 1990, Charlie got a letter from Canada, from a man named Franz Stigler. The letter said, "I read your ad. I think I may be the pilot you're looking for. On December 20th, 1943, I was flying a Bf-109 near Bremen. I encountered a badly damaged B-17. I didn't shoot it down. Could we talk?" Charlie couldn't believe it. After all these years, all this time wondering, 46 years of questions, he immediately called the number in the letter, and Franz Stigler answered the phone. Their first phone conversation lasted 4 hours. They compared notes, details of the encounter. Franz described the damage he'd seen on the B-17. Charlie confirmed every detail. The dead tail gunner, the missing nose, the smoking engines. It was him, without a doubt. This was the man who'd saved his life. Charlie asked the question he'd been carrying for 46 years. Why? Why did you spare us? Franz's answer was simple. I didn't have the heart to shoot you. You were already a flying coffin. I thought about my brother, about honor, about what kind of man I wanted to be, and I couldn't do it. Franz explained more. He told Charlie about his commander in North Africa, Gustav Rodel, a man who'd once told him, "If I ever see you shoot at a man in a parachute, I'll shoot you myself. Honor demands better." Franz had carried that lesson his entire life. Within weeks, they met in person. June 1990, Seattle, Washington. Charlie and his wife drove to Franz's home in Vancouver. When the door opened and they saw each other for the first time, face to face. 47 years after that December day, they embraced, like brothers. Franz was 71 years old. Charlie was 68. Two old men, once enemies. Now, something deeper than friends. They spent the weekend together, talking, laughing, crying, sharing their lives. Their families met. Their wives became friends. And from that day forward, they were inseparable. They attended air shows together, gave speeches together, appeared at veteran events. They told their story to anyone who would listen. At one event, someone asked Franz, "Do you regret not shooting him down? You would have gotten the Knight's Cross." Franz didn't hesitate. "I got something better than a medal. I got a friend for life, and I got to live with myself. No medal is worth losing your honor." They attended reunions of Charlie's old bomber group. And here's what's beautiful. The American veterans, men who'd fought Germans, men who'd lost friends to German fighters, they welcomed Franz, embraced him, called him a brother, because his story was proof that even in the worst of wars, humanity could survive. In 2006, a writer named Adam Makos heard their story. He spent years interviewing both men, researching, verifying every detail. The result was a book, A Higher Call, published in 2012. It became a bestseller. Their story reached millions of people. It's been taught in military academies, used in ethics courses, referenced in discussions about the rules of war and human dignity. But Charlie and Franz didn't care about fame. They just wanted people to understand. Even in war, you have choices. Even when everyone expects you to kill, you can choose mercy. Franz used to say, "The war made us enemies, but honor and humanity made us friends. Which one do you think is more powerful?" Their friendship lasted 18 years, from 1990 until their deaths. Charlie Brown died on November 24, 2008. He was 87 years old. Franz Stigler died 4 months later, on March 22, 2009. He was 92. Some people say Franz died of a broken heart, that after losing his friend, he just let go. They're buried thousands of miles apart. Charlie in West Virginia, Franz in Vancouver. But in all the ways that matter, they're together. Their families remain close, still visit each other, still honor the bond that two old warriors built from an act of mercy on a winter day in 1943. So what do we learn from Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown? First, honor isn't about what you're ordered to do. It's about who you choose to be when no one's watching. Franz could have shot Charlie down. No one would have blamed him. He'd have gotten his medal, been celebrated as a hero. No one would have ever known he'd passed up an easy kill. But he would have known, and he couldn't live with that. Second, the enemy is human. In the heat of war, it's easy to forget that, to see the enemy as just the enemy. Not as people with families, with fears, with their own code of honor. Franz saw through the metal and guns. He saw wounded kids just trying to survive, and that changed everything. Third, mercy isn't weakness. Some people think showing compassion in war is being soft, being naive. Franz was a combat veteran with 27 kills. He wasn't soft. He wasn't naive. He was strong enough to make the harder choice. It takes no courage to kill someone who can't fight back. It takes tremendous courage to spare them. Fourth, it's never too late for reconciliation. Charlie and Franz found each other 46 years after that day. Most people would say that's too late. The moment was gone. Too much time had passed. But they proved that wrong. They built one of the most meaningful friendships imaginable. In the last years of their lives, they found something beautiful. War had made them enemies, but they refused to let it have the last word. And finally, small moments matter. Franz's decision took maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds where he chose not to pull the trigger. 10 seconds that saved 10 lives. 10 seconds that led to a lifelong friendship. 10 seconds that gave us this story. One moment, one choice, changed everything. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What hit you hardest about this story? Franz's decision to spare them? The 46-year search? The friendship that followed? And here's a bigger question. Do you think this kind of honor still exists in modern warfare? Or was this something unique to that generation? Let me know what you think. I read every comment. Let's talk for a moment about the aircraft involved, because they're part of this story too. The B-17 Flying Fortress, one of the most iconic aircraft of World War II. Built by Boeing, first flew in 1935. Over 12,000 produced. It had a crew of 10, 4 engines, could carry 8,000 pounds of bombs, bristling with 50 caliber machine guns, supposed to be able to defend itself. But as Charlie's crew learned, against concentrated fighter attacks, even the Flying Fortress was vulnerable. The B-17's true strength wasn't its weapons. It was its ability to take damage and keep flying. There are countless stories of B-17s returning with catastrophic damage. Engines gone, tail sections barely attached, wings riddled with holes, and still they brought their crews home. WWII Pub was a perfect example. It took over 400 hits, lost engines, lost most of its defensive weapons, and still made it back to England. The men who flew B-17s loved them, trusted them, called them the plane that could take a beating and keep on ticking. Charlie Brown flew 29 combat missions in B-17s. He survived the war, and he always said, the B-17 was built by people who cared whether we came home. You could feel that in every flight. Now the Messerschmitt Bf 109, Franz's aircraft. This was Germany's frontline fighter throughout the war. First flew in 1935, same year as the B-17. Over 33,000 built, more than any other fighter aircraft in history. The Bf-109 was fast, agile, armed with machine guns and cannon. At high altitude, it could outmaneuver almost anything the Allies had in 1943. But it had limitations. Short range, limited ammunition, could only stay in combat for about 15 to 20 minutes before having to return to base. Franz flew over 400 combat missions in Bf-109s. He loved the aircraft, called it a pilot's fighter, responsive, powerful, but demanding. He also flew the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter near the end of the war, one of the first operational jet fighters. But the 109 was his first love. On December 20th, 1943, those two aircraft met, the American bomber and the German fighter, built by enemies, designed to destroy each other. But that day, they flew together, side by side, not as enemies, but as, what? Survivors? Brothers in arms? Maybe just two machines, carrying two men who chose humanity over hatred. It's important to understand how rare Franz's action was. World War II was total war. The concept of chivalry, of honorable combat, had largely disappeared. Strategic bombing targeted civilians. Cities were firebombed. The rules that had governed warfare for centuries were breaking down. German fighter pilots were under enormous pressure. By late 1943, the Luftwaffe was losing the air war. Every bomber that reached its target meant more German factories destroyed, more German civilians killed. Fighter pilots like Franz weren't just defending military targets. They were defending their families, their homes, their cities. The Knight's Cross that Franz would have earned for his 28th kill, it wasn't just a medal. It came with privileges. Better housing, better rations, respect. In a collapsing Germany, those things mattered. And yet, Franz walked away from all of that. He chose 10 American lives over his own advancement. In the middle of a war, his country was losing. When every bomber shot down might have made a difference. That's what makes this story so powerful. He had every reason to shoot, every justification, every incentive, and he still chose mercy. There are other documented cases of similar acts. British pilots helping German pilots, German U-boat commanders rescuing Allied sailors. Moments of humanity in the midst of horror. But they were rare, so rare that we remember them. Tell their stories, because they remind us that even in the worst circumstances, we have choices. Franz used to say, "The war didn't make me spare that bomber. The war told me to shoot it down. I spared it despite the war. That was my choice, my decision, and I'm proud of it." Charlie Brown's crew consisted of 10 men. 9 survived that mission. Let's think about that. 9 men went home because Franz Stigler chose mercy. 9 men saw their families again, had children, grandchildren, lived full lives. If you count descendants, Franz's one decision likely affected hundreds of people. People who exist because their grandfather or great-grandfather made it home from Bremen in December 1943. One of the crew members, the radio operator, later said, "I think about that German pilot every Christmas. My kids think about him. My grandkids know his name. He's part of our family story. The enemy who gave us our lives back." That's powerful. Generations of Americans who honor a German fighter pilot, who teach their children about mercy and honor, all because of one moment, and it works both ways. Franz's family tells his story with enormous pride, not pride in his kills, not pride in his medals, but pride in that moment when he chose humanity. His grandchildren say, "That's who Opa was. A man who knew the difference between being a soldier and being a killer. The story has been taught in military academies around the world, used in ethics courses, referenced in discussions about the laws of war, because it raises important questions. When does an enemy become defenseless? What are the limits of military necessity? Is there still room for honor in modern warfare? Franz and Charlie prove there is. They prove that humanity can survive even the worst of wars. So that's the story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown. December 20th, 1943. A German fighter pilot chose mercy over glory, saved 9 American lives, risked his own life to escort them to safety, then kept silent for 46 years, until 1990, when 2 old warriors found each other and discovered that the moment that had haunted them both had become the foundation for one of the most beautiful friendships imaginable. They spent 18 years as brothers, telling their story, showing the world that war doesn't have to destroy our humanity, that even enemies can become family. When Franz died in 2009, his family found a letter he'd written, to be opened after his death. It said, "I flew over 400 combat missions. I shot down 27 aircraft. I received many medals. But the moment I'm most proud of is the day I didn't pull the trigger. The day I chose to be more than a killer. The day I found my friend." That letter is now on display at the Air Force Academy, next to a painting of a Bf-109 flying alongside a B-17, both aircraft silhouetted against a winter sky. The painting is titled, "A Higher Call." Now I want to hear from you one more time. Please, drop a comment below. What does this story mean to you? Have you ever shown mercy when you didn't have to? Have you ever been shown mercy when you expected none? This story matters. These kinds of stories need to be told, shared, remembered. So please, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. If you want more stories like this, stories about humanity in war, about honor and sacrifice, about weapons and the people who use them, subscribe to this channel. I've got more incredible World War II stories coming. Trust me, history is full of moments like this. We just have to look for them. Before I go, let me leave you with something Charlie Brown said in one of his last interviews. Someone asked him, "What do you want people to remember about your story?" Charlie thought for a moment, then said, "I want people to remember that war is real, but so is mercy, and mercy is stronger." Franz Stigler proved that. He had every reason to hate us, every reason to kill us, and he chose love instead. Not romantic love, but human love. The love that says, "You are my enemy, but you are also my brother, and I will not kill you today." War is real, but so is mercy, and mercy is stronger. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to their story, and thank you for helping keep their memory alive. Remember Franz Stigler. Remember Charlie Brown. Remember that even in the darkest moments, we have a choice. Until next time, fly safe, choose mercy, and never forget that your enemy is human too. See you in the next one.